Hello and welcome to the Retirement Essentials, Protecting Your Retirement in the COVID-19 Era. My name is Devin Peterson. I'm excited for everyone to join us here on this live presentation. We're going to start our webinar here in a few minutes, but as we prepare for this webinar, I just want to give you a bit of a chance to file in and get yourself situated for this class. We've put a lot of time and effort into making sure that you have all the resources necessary to have a successful experience in this class. So first of all, breathe and sit back and enjoy yourself as we cover this content that I personally think is so amazing and valuable in the world that we live in. So we've made it as easy as possible for you to digest. So it looks like we're getting a lot of people coming into class. It's good to see you guys. If you want to, let me give you a quick overview of the class format, what you see, and some of the technology that we're using for this class. You can see on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see a menu where it has a chat, Q&A, polls, and handouts. This is kind of your tool belt to be able to access and use the tools that we have created for this class experience. We encourage you to use the chat as much as you can. If you have any questions for the group or comments on some of the content that we're covering, feel free to type it in there. The Q&A is for if you have a specific question that you want us to answer towards the end of the webinar. We're going to hold all the questions until the end, and then I'll set aside some time to get to a few of your questions. So our assistants will compile those and then share those with me at the end, so we can cover those and hopefully make this content a little bit more individual and customized to your questions. Throughout this class, we'll actually have several poll questions where I'd love to get your feedback, have you raise your hands to see how you really relate and account to some of the content that we're talking about. And then handouts. If you click on that handout part of the menu, you'll actually see a workbook. So if you're one of those folks that loves to follow along and loves to have the textbook like you did back in college, click on that handout, click download, and download your workbook for this class today, for this Retirement Essentials class. So right now inside of the chat, if you want to type in your first name and maybe what city you're from, I'd love to hear from our audience today and see where our class is actually coming from. Looks like I can see quite a few in the class here. Let's see, Cherie, it's good to see you. Daniel, good. Sarah, Ladon, Victoria, so good to see all of you here. Feel free to go through and as you're coming into the class, put your name and the city that you're from. Wonderful. Well, as we start off into this class, I want to start off by really giving you an idea of what our promise here is today. Because as a team, we've put a lot of time and effort to showing up and creating a class that's going to be very beneficial for you. And so our promise for you today joining in this class is this. We know that you will be able to better understand your retirement landscape and how it has changed because of this recent pandemic. Just look around. Our world is a different world, but how that affects your retirement is really yet to be determined, yet to be seen. And that's what our promise is today, is we understand that first and foremost. As we understand that, then we are going to help you gain confidence in your ability to create a plan that will succeed in any economy. I know a lot of us have a lot of uncertainty and a feeling of kind of ungroundedness around us as our environment changes so quickly, but our promise is that as you participate today, you'll walk away with a better understanding and then confidence that you can create a plan that can succeed in any economy. Does that sound fair? Okay. I'm glad that you're joining me in this experience. So for those of you that joined us today through this webinar, we have a special live webinar bonus for you. Yes, I know that is a juicy looking lobster and steak there. We just want to say thank you for taking the time to showing up and participating inside of this class. So for everyone that's joining, there's two offers. First, we have a Ruth's Chris gift card and then a free access to a Blue Leaf. So these two kind of gift cards. But anytime we do this, I'm always so curious for you, what would you actually use more or would actually prefer? So what type of gift card would you prefer? Would you prefer a Ruth's Chris gift card or an Amazon gift card? We'd love to hear your feedback on that. But if you continue through to the end of this class today, we're going to give both of those to you. All right. So continuing on, if you decide to join us inside a Brighter 360 planning session, which is kind of the next step in the process of improving upon your retirement plans, we're also going to up the ante a little bit and add a $50 Ruth's Chris gift card. So both of those together, 25 to be able to attend today, and then 50 once you complete a Brighter 360 plan, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We feel like we want to be able to give you some extra value inside of that plan. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, so to get into what we're going to talk about today, over the next 60 minutes, we as a team want to share with you really 4 risks that will threaten your retirement because of the changes in 2020. And then also we want to talk about 4 solutions that will protect your retirement in any economy and really how to find them and implement them. Now, inside of our planning process, which we call the Brighter 360 process, we're going to address all 4 of these risks and all 4 of these solutions. So if we have the pleasure of sitting down with you and completing a Brighter 360 plan, you'll absolutely get a more individualized and customized conversation around these 4 risks and these 4 solutions. So there will be a button that pops up throughout this presentation that will give you an opportunity to sign up for a conversation with us. Complimentary, no commitment, but we want to be able to start a conversation with you and see where that goes, right? Okay, so continuing on, a little bit about me before we dig into today's content. I know you didn't show up today to learn about me, but I think it's very relevant that you know who I am, where I come from, and why I'm teaching this type of class. So again, my name is Devin Peterson. I am the president of Brighter Wealth Advisors and a retirement income certified professional. Essentially, that's a master's degree for nerds like me that love to work with folks like you. This is a picture of my wife and my 5 wonderful, energetic children. As a firm, Brighter Wealth Advisors, we are a comprehensive retirement planning firm. We're conservative wealth managers and then independent fiduciaries. All 3 of those elements are what we feel like are needed to help someone like you put together quality plans that have your best interests in heart, and give you as much confidence moving into this new reality after a pandemic as possible. As a firm, we are firm believers in education. Obviously, we're showing up on this webinar and providing this free content for you today, but that is actually just a small portion of what we do. If you want to go to brighterwealth.com, you'll see a lot of our additional educational content there. We've created a masterclass called the Retirement Taxation Masterclass that you're able to access. And we have a weekly podcast called Brighter Retirement Radio that really our goal there is to show up and educate and give you confidence as you move through retirement. So that's a little bit about me and why we're here. And moving into today's content, if you want to follow along in your workbook, remember to download that from the handout section. So moving into this, the first part of our presentation today is really these 4 risks that are going to provide the framework for the 4 risks and 4 solutions throughout today's conversation. And those are timing risk, increasing taxes, increasing healthcare costs, and inflation risk. Really, we could end this webinar right here because all 4 of those are pretty obvious to see how they could threaten your retirement. So our goal today is to dig into those, understand them again a little bit more, and build some confidence that you can plan to prepare yourself against those. All right, so the first is timing risk. So this first concept that I want to share with you is this idea of the retirement red zone. If you're familiar with the game of football, the last 20 yards before the end zone is called the red zone. That's where the defense plays a little bit differently. They know that the offense is coming close to their end zone. They're about to get scored on. They're about to lose if they get scored on. And so they change up their tactics and play a little bit differently. Well, in the world of retirement finance, there's actually a retirement red zone, which is 5 years before and 5 years after you retire. Well, why would that be the case? Well, though that 10-year period is the time where your retirement assets are more susceptible to market loss. And if there's an extreme amount of market loss inside of that time, you're more likely to run out of money further on in retirement. This is a higher risk than if you were 20 years into retirement and you only had 10 years to go, because the compounding effect over the years makes a big deal. So I'd love for you to kind of raise your hand here if we can pop up a poll. And I'd love for you to kind of comment back and say, which phase of the red zone are you in? Are you in the pre-red zone? So are you more than 5 years before retirement? Are you in the red zone? Are you between 5 years before and 5 years after retirement? Or are you in the post-red zone? Are you more than 5 years into retirement? That will give us a good idea of what audience we're speaking to today as we understand this timing risk. So for those of you that are in the red zone, to kind of give you a heads up, 2020 is definitely a tough market to retire in. Or if you retired 2 years ago, or you retired in 2 years, that definitely puts a big question mark on, will my retirement plan succeed? And do I need to do some different planning around that? So absolutely something to consider in a phone conversation with us or a Brighter 360 plan. So to illustrate this, I want to share an example with you. So this is a classic example of what we call the sequence of returns, meaning the order in which returns of the market happen for you. So we're going to illustrate two families. One family is the Hatfields, and the second family is the McCoys. And so the Hatfields, illustrated right here in orange, both families are the same. Initially, they both retired with $500,000 in the retirement savings account at age 65. Both of them took $25,000 a year in supplemental income, right, from their retirement accounts. And both of them lived to age 90. However, that's where the similarity ends. You can see here the Hatfields experienced significant market setbacks in the first several years of their retirement. And so they had a lot of heavy hits to the market, kind of like we did in 2020 or 2007. Into their market account, but still needed that retirement income to be able to supplement their lifestyle. However, the McCoys had the exact same returns over that 30-year period, exact same net return of 9%, but instead the negative significant setbacks inside of their market didn't happen for 21 years. It happened later on in their retirement. And that simple timing difference between the Hatfields and McCoys made the Hatfields actually run out of money at age 90. Their accounts went to zero. And the McCoys passed away at 95 with $2.7 million inside of their accounts. The only difference was the order in which they received those returns. So that's why you can see that the red zone, these 5 years before and 5 years after retirement, are so vital. Because if those losses are early on in your retirement, it has a significant negative impact in your retirement. So the general broad impact from this timing risk for you is that you're more likely to run out of money before you die in retirement if you're inside of that red zone and there's market loss. And because we're in a down market right now with COVID, then that's something to consider that might be a threat to your retirement. Okay. And so a solution for this as we're going through this process is signing up for a Brighter 360 plan. We're able to sit down and look at where the timing of your retirement and really determine what would it look like if I retired today, or do I need to retire in 5 years or 6 years from now to be able to have a more healthy retirement. Does that make sense? So this next risk is increasing tax risk. Now, If I was to ask you, are taxes going to go up and down or up and down? We would actually have a mixed bag of responses. We all would hope that taxes would stay the same or go down in the future. However, we're in a unique low tax bracket experience right now. However, because this is a retirement essentials protecting your retirement from a COVID-19 era class, we're going to hone in specifically on what has happened in 2020 and how is that impacting your retirement. And so we're going to start right here at the beginning of the year. After the pandemic had spread globally, Congress passed a series of acts. First, the CARES Act, and then the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, and then the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Act. All together, this equaled $2 trillion of new taxpayer debt that we just added on within a week's time. It's $2 trillion in debt, and that's additional debt. Before COVID, we were actually already $23 trillion in debt. Yeah, that's trillion with a T. And so in a matter of weeks, we added 2 trillion onto our already 23 trillion, which is really compounding this impact that the tax man has to get paid sometime, right? And so the impact is really increased future taxes in your retirement. Okay, so you might be asking, why have I kind of drawn the connection between our government's debt and increased taxes for you in retirement? So let's kind of connect those, and let me show you why that is the case. So to explain that, let me kind of have you consider this at least. Let's bring this down to something that either you as an individual or you and your spouse together can really relate with, which is household finances. So consider this. If you were a household that had financial difficulty, hopefully you're not $25 trillion in debt, right? But let's say you're in debt and it does not look pretty and you're going $1 trillion per year more in debt, or $1,000 per more year in debt, or $10,000 more per year in debt. You're in a financial difficulty. What are your options as a household? As you can see on the slide, you really have 4 basic options. You could file for bankruptcy. You could cut expenses, right? Which might look like less traveling, less extravagant gifts for grandkids for Christmas, less times getting your nails done, or you could increase your revenue, right? Either of you could go out and get a new part-time job. You could sell some of your antiques in your basement or in your garage. You could raise more capital, raise more revenue, right? Or number 4, you could do both of those. You could cut expenses and increase revenue. So 4 basic options. Now, as we relate this to our government, we ask the same question. What are the options for a government in financial difficulty, like we see our US government in? And those 4 options are absolutely viable options, right? Number 1, you could file for bankruptcy. However, if the US defaults on their interest payments, we would actually have a world economic collapse because there's so much debt that's relying on the value of the dollar. So it is a option, but is it a option? Probably not, right? Well, what about number 2, cut expenses? Well, how would we do that? Well, considering that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are the largest portions of our spending, spending cuts would have to come in those 3 areas, if not one, maybe all 3, to have a significant impact. So consider for yourself, if the government cut expenses, meaning cut your Social Security, or they cut your Medicare payments, made it more expensive for you, or cut off the poor and indigent by cutting off Medicare, would that impact you? Yes, no, maybe? Or could you maybe see the government doing option number 4, which would be cutting expenses and increasing revenue? That third one right there, increasing revenue, the only way that the government really raises revenue is taxes and fees, right? So might you be impacted if your taxes went up in retirement? For sure. So options 2, 3, and 4 all impact you as a retiree. So that's why we say the CARES Act adding $2 trillion in debt equals higher taxes in retirement, because it really comes down, the fundamental economics come down into dollars can only go around so much, and they have to be accounted for somehow. And so that's where we kind of come down and say it absolutely, the most likely option that we see on here is increases taxes. So let me ask you though, which one of these options do you feel will best improve our government's financial difficulty? So here's a poll question for you. 1, file for bankruptcy. 2, cut expenses. C, increase revenue. Or D, both. Which one of those do you think will best improve your government's financial difficulty? It's hard to answer this question because this would directly impact your finances, but I would love to hear what you have to say anyway. All right, continuing on. That's kind of my perspective. As a team, that's our perspective. However, let's kind of go to someone who really knows what they're talking about. So this quote right here is by David Walker. Well, who is David Walker? David Walker was the comptroller general for the U.S. for 10 years under Bush and Clinton. He was the head of the General Accountability Office, the Board of Trustees for Social Security, and really knows the U.S. finances inside and out. He's actually been known to be called America's CPA. So he knows our finances inside out. And he had this to say. He said, regardless of what politicians tell you, any additional accumulations of debt are basically deferred tax increases. Basically deferred tax increases. So what's really the impact for you? Well, like we talked about in those scenarios and those options, really taxes will take a greater portion of your income over time. And if you're used to a certain amount of income after taxes, and then they take more taxes, it's like they're taking income away from you, or that's at least what it feels like. Okay. This one is actually extremely powerful inside the Brighter 360 plan that we sit down with our clients and talk about, because there are strategies to get you out of those heavy tax deferred accounts like 401ks and IRAs, where you're going to pay 100% of the tax burden on those. So inside of the Brighter 360 plan, if you sign up for that, we'll be able to go through that experience and identify several times where you can convert, maybe it's a Roth conversion, or take some strategic withdrawals and pay the taxes now, knowing that likely taxes will be higher in the future. So that's just a little sneak peek there. This next one, increasing healthcare cost risk. Consider for yourself. When I say healthcare cost risk, there's Medicare that all of us are familiar with, but then there's also long-term care, and that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to point this out and say, well, who will need long-term care? Well, 70% of those that are currently on long-term care are over 65. And currently there's 12 million folks that are actually on long-term care, whether that's an assisted living or a hospice, or a memory care facility if they have like dementia or Alzheimer's. 12 million people currently on that. So I want you to consider for yourself. Here's another poll question for you. Do you have a plan to cover your unexpected long-term care expenses? Yes, no, or maybe not sure. The scope of this class is not to talk specifically about what those expenses are and when exactly to incur those expenses, but I do want to share a little bit about what to expect over time. So currently those expenses for a nursing home private room are about $8,500 a month. Now that's full care, full doctor or nurse care with medication and housekeeping, but you can obviously scale that back to homemaker services or home health care or home health aid or just adult daycare. But still, those are thousands of dollars a month. If we consider inflation, which we'll talk about in this next section, if we consider inflation, what it's likely to be in 9 years from now, in 2029, is much, much higher. That same private room that cost you $8,500 today a month now costs you $13,000, almost $14,000 a month. So you can see how unexpected and unplanned for healthcare costs or long-term care costs can significantly negatively impact your retirement portfolio later on if you don't have a plan for it. So as it pertains to the COVID-19 year, this 2020, we want to point out that as it stands today, healthcare costs can be very expensive for those that have not really planned for it. And Medicare, that all of us are familiar with, generally won't pay for long-term care since it's custodial in nature, meaning that it relates with the assistance of everyday living and isn't strictly medical. And as such, seniors and their families are left often to absorb these astronomical costs on their own. And unfortunately, though, current monthly costs may start to look fairly cheap compared to what they could be because of what COVID-19 has done. And let me kind of share you some insight on why that is the case for as far as what we see. Now, since March to the time of this class, there has been over 26,000 deaths in nursing homes across the country. So proportionally, that's extremely high percentage of our population. And there were over 8,000 long-term care facilities that have reported these deaths, but really that's only 54% of facilities that have reported. So they're anticipating these death numbers to be a lot higher. So why does that matter? Well, inside of these businesses, there's been such an impact that now these long-term care providers are going to really rethink how they train staff, how they rotate staff, how they implement sanitary standards to avoid a repeat scenario in the future, which all those changes and additional staff really just drive up costs in the future. So what we think is expensive now might actually seem like a bargain later on because of all these changes that likely will be made inside of these long-term care facilities. So the impact for you as a retiree really is that quality long-term care will be even more expensive to receive in the future. Over the last 20 years, the inflation rate of the cost of long-term care has significantly outpaced anything else: milk, egg, cheese, the cost of gas, because healthcare costs have gotten so expensive. COVID-19 is only going to add to that problem. So let's continue on to this last risk, which is inflation risk. Now, inflation, if you're familiar with what that is, it is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon explained by the economist Milton Friedman. And so really, how is that impacting us here in this COVID-19 era? Well, if we kind of break it down to the fundamentals of what inflation is, right? As a general statement, we know what inflation is, right? It's something costs $5 today, and then next year it's going to cost $5.50, and then the next year $6. So it's increasing the cost of the same good. So really, there's three main causes of inflation. So there's too much money creation, there's budget deficits, and then there's increasing economic efficiency. So we're going to touch on these three briefly here inside of this class. And I think after we go through this short section, your eyes are going to say, oh my goodness, that is 2020. And no wonder why this is now a bigger than ever risk for us. So too much money creation. To kind of put it simply, the Central Bank of the United States seems to have an ultimate superpower as it virtually prints dollars out of nothing with a few strokes of a computer. So by the end of the year, 2020, the Fed is projected to purchase about $3.5 trillion in government securities. That's that print button on their computer. They just print it, which really is they purchase securities. And all of these are newly created dollars. $3.5 trillion. That's the $2 trillion that we just went into debt with the CARES Act, plus another trillion that we already were slated to go over budget by. So that's your three plus a bit. So $3.5 trillion. And this is one of the tools that they've been using to support our ailing economy, or our sick economy during the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the rate that they're creating money, it creates potentially, double to triple digit inflation. I know that sounds crazy, but economically, the math does work on that. So absolutely something to look for and be concerned with. This next one, budget deficits. Of course, we just talked about the new $1 trillion that we just added in the CARES Act, plus the other $1.1 trillion that we are already planned to go over budget in. And so clearly we have larger than normal, I say that with tongue in cheek, larger than we've ever had in budget deficits before. And this third one is increasing economic inefficiency. So this one, you're going to kind of have to think big picture, think global economy. For the last 10 years, our global economy has gotten really efficient. We have supply chains from China and India and Europe that have all interconnected. A lot of them have been fine-tuned to just-in-time production, meaning someone delivers something just in time to add it to their part, and then they ship it out to sell it. So they don't hold a lot of inventory costs. So our whole world has been this one very efficient machine. However, this pandemic has actually stopped the machine and broken a few cogs inside of that machine. Across the world, as supply chains were stopped, there were factories that went out of business. There was companies that went out of business. Several businesses are having to reconfigure or find new suppliers, or maybe bring new suppliers or create their own suppliers inside of the United States, as opposed to going over to Asia. So there's a lot of inefficiencies that were added to the machine as we've kind of experienced this COVID-19 era. As of this webinar date, we're actually doing a better job of putting it back together than I initially thought. But that's kind of one element that's adding to this increased inflation, because as the machine is less efficient, the costs go up, and they push those costs onto you and I as the consumer. And so really the impact for us, let's kind of bring it back to us really quick, is that your money will purchase less over time. So if there is double-digit inflation over the next several years, let's call it simple 10% inflation. So here, just looking at this quick example, if your monthly expenses increase by 10% a year, how would that impact you and your retirement lifestyle? Well, in the quick math here, current $5,000 a month in 5 years would be $8,000 a month. So would that impact you at all? So let me ask you this poll question right here. If your monthly expenses increase dramatically over a 5-year period, how would you feel about your retirement finances? So first, would you be not too concerned because you have plenty of excess income, meaning you live beneath your means? Would you be somewhat concerned, extremely concerned, or too late, I'm already ran out of money after 5 years? So consider for yourself how close to the line you are with your expenses and your income, and would inflation really put you out of business really quick? This one is actually really interesting. Inside of our Brighter 360 plan, as long as your assets are keeping up with inflation and growing without too much risk, you increase your likelihood of not running out of money. So a big part of our Brighter 360 plan is understanding how much return and risk you have inside of your portfolio and doing the best to improve your returns while reducing some of your risk. So super exciting stuff. So if you're interested in signing up for a Brighter 360 plan, feel free to click on the schedule now pop-up. We'd love to get you into our office or on the phone call. But generally speaking, going back over these 4 risks, as a reminder, those who retire in the COVID-19 era will likely run out of money earlier taxes will take a greater portion of your income. Long-term care is going to be more expensive to receive, and your money will purchase less over time. So you can see the heart of why we put this course together, because all four of those can significantly derail your retirement success. And we want to do our best to plow through those or plan for those. And so what we're going to do is spell out 4 solutions that we've seen help be really beneficial. So if you want to go back to your handbook and follow along and write down a couple of thoughts that you have based on what we're talking about. And then when we jump on a phone call or a virtual call or here in the office, we can talk through those that you feel like are relatable to you. And so let's kind of first start off on this timing risk. Remember, we talked about the retirement red zone. One solution for the timing risk is creating non-correlated assets. Really what that means is different types of investments. So you might have your Social Security and your pension income sources. You might have stocks, bonds, mutual funds. You might have an annuity. You might have rental properties. You might have business interests. You might have additional savings at the bank. So several non-correlated assets that if the market is down, you can pull your supplemental cash from a safe bucket. So that's an idea inside of there. With the Brighter 360 plan, how we've created this, we always create a version of your the timing of your plan to be, as you can see kind of here on the screen, your current investments, and then a couple of versions of timing inside of your retirement. So that might be you're planning on retiring at 65 and having an income of $120,000 a year. Or it might be retiring at 67 with reducing some of your income, or it might be delaying your Social Security until 70 and using some of your portfolio in the meantime. We can kind of see some of the timing variations so you can choose which path is more successful for you. Increasing tax risk solutions. So this is one of my favorite topics within retirement finance, because a penny saved is a penny earned. Any dollars less that goes to the government is 100% of a bonus to you in your pocket. And so reducing your taxes not only now, but in the future is so powerful. So in increasing this, what you can do is implement tax strategies that help maximize your lower brackets now and move you from tax deferred into a tax-free environment, where a lot of you in this class today might actually never pay taxes in retirement if you plan appropriately. So in this example, you can see we use a couple of different tools inside of our Brighter 360 plan as solutions to help you accomplish that. One of them is called a tax story. The other one is called a Brighter Giving Impact worksheet. If you have some kind of several charitable desires inside of your retirement. So ask yourself this question: do you plan to have a tax plan? Do you have a tax plan that will help you minimize the taxes that you'll pay in retirement? Yes, no, or I don't know. So consider that, and really, I encourage you to find some solutions in that, because the tax code is black and white. If you can get some tax savings inside of there, that's almost better than a better return on your portfolio, because it's for sure you can save those dollars. Okay. This next one we're going to talk about is increasing healthcare cost risk. So leverage a portion of your current investments to double or triple your assets for long-term care. So this one is a really interesting one. We talked about increasing long-term care costs. Really, when it comes to planning for your retirement, if it's possible to leverage some of your current accounts without going out and paying for an expensive long-term care policy, or without having to save $250,000 in an account that's just to be used for long-term care needs if you need it. One thing I do want to point out before we continue on here, you can see inside on my screen, you see these two sheets that say 55% and 97%. Long-term care healthcare expenses can be devastating to your portfolio. If you plan for a 4 or 5 year period at the end of your retirement for that heightened amount of expenses. Inside of this Brighter 360 plan that we do, we can actually give you a percentage success of retirement, meaning percentage that you have chance of not running out of money. And so in these two plans right here, the first plan had a 55% chance of not running out of money, and the next one had a 97% chance of not running out of money, primarily because this family added some of those assets, in those leveraged assets, into their retirement plan. Okay. Last solution in here, inflation risk solutions. And I had mentioned this briefly in the last section as we're talking about this risk. They're inside of your assets, regardless of what you own, there is an inherent risk that you're currently taking inside of that. If you own all real estate, your risk is if the real estate market drops in value. If you have all stocks and bonds, the risk is the stock market values dropping in those accounts. If you hold everything that you own in cash, well, the risk is inflation going up and making your dollars worth less. And so there's an inherent risk that we all hold. However, inside of your portfolio, there is a way to reduce your risk and keep your returns the same, if not increase them a little bit. And if you can keep up with inflation and strategically add that into your retirement plan, you're on the right path. Okay. Now, as we kind of step back a little bit and look at what we've talked about and look at what some of these solutions are, I want to speak a little bit more about this Brighter 360 plan. Now, for all of you that have gotten to this point of the class, we're going to send you that $25 gift card, as well as access to Blue Leaf, which is like account aggregating software, to be able to help simplify your finances. However, taking the next step to click on the schedule a consultation and just start a question with us, or start a conversation with us, an advisory firm, can go a long way into your retirement preparation. So here at Brighter Wealth, we've created a specific plan called a Brighter 360 plan that is meant to actually address all the concerns that all of you have showed up with today. And so what we do inside of that plan, we collect all the data needed to really make some good decisions. We analyze, kind of crunch those numbers and see how they plan out in your plan, build a couple of recommendations and versions of your plan that you absolutely have a part in creating. And we compare those plans back and forth. And then guess what? You decide which one you feel like fits your goals the best. These are not just our hard, fast recommendations. We are a team member helping you create the retirement that you want to create. And so that's what that Brighter 360 plan is meant to do, is meant to kind of start a conversation at first and then be kind of a back and forth between you and our retirement planning team to create with you as a member of your team this experience inside of the Brighter 360 plan. We also take into consideration the inside of your CPA or tax consultant, your estate planning attorney, and then any of your Medicare specialist to make sure all the pieces to your plan actually fit inside of there. Okay. So before we kind of continue on, I do want to ask you one last poll question, which is, do you have a written plan to protect your retirement in any economy? Yes, no, or like maybe somewhat. Maybe I met with an advisor one time and we kind of put something together, but there hasn't been a lot of follow-up, or I don't know, we did a portfolio management plan where I know what my investments are doing, but I don't really know how that ties in with Social Security and my expenses and long-term care. So many of you here, and feel free to chat this or add this into the chat or the Q&As, but many of you have some semblance of a plan. I'm sure you do. All of you here, I know, are successful individuals and have gotten this far and this close to retirement, no doubt. It's just taking the next few steps to improve upon already the many great things that you have in place. So as we start to wrap up this class, I'm going to explain a couple of these bonuses, and then I want to do a Q&A. and really address some of your individual questions. So if you've got to this part of the class, we want to tell you thank you. We'll be sending you a Ruth's Chris gift card for attending this live event. And then also access to Blueleaf. So a quick note on Blueleaf. Blueleaf is an account aggregation software. So you can put all of your accounts in one place. So investment accounts, your 401k, your brokerage account, your Roth IRA, your CDs, your checking. You can put your mortgage on there to kind of see everything in one spot. And then even more powerful than that, you can actually set limits to say like, okay, I don't want to lose more than 10% in these accounts. We call those wealth guard numbers. You can set those numbers and they'll actually alert you if those boundaries have been crossed. So even without an advisor, it can be a very powerful tool for you to kind of see what you have in one place and then set some parameters or boundaries around some of the losses inside of your account. So very powerful for conservative wealth managers. Okay. And then, of course, I want to give you a last opportunity to sign up for a conversation with us. If you finish a Brighter 360 plan, you'll get another $50 Ruth's Chris gift card to add to your already 25. And a phone conversation with us does not have to be a long conversation. We would love to just start a conversation and see what some of your concerns are moving forward. This Brighter 360 plan is a process that usually takes a few appointments to kind of work through all the details to get you some recommendations. So after you complete that process, we'll send you that last gift card. Okay, and let's ask. All right. So as we come to the last portion of this class, I want to take a moment to answer some of your questions. So I've asked my staff to gather together some of those questions, and so we can kind of go through those. Okay, looks like there's quite a few. I apologize, we won't be able to get to all of your questions, but I do want to address many that you do have here. Okay. The first question is, do you offer in-office visits? Absolutely. If you've been part of this COVID world that we live in, you're most likely pretty tired of being shut up at home and staying at home. We are very conscientious about social distancing. And so if you decide to come into our office, we do have sanitary facilities, social distancing, masks. We clean our conference rooms between every appointment. So we'll definitely create a safe environment there for you. But we also offer virtual appointments or phone calls if you want to connect with us that way, whatever your safety level is. Okay. Next question here. I see from the beginning of your presentation, you talked about a fiduciary. What is a fiduciary? Great question. So a fiduciary is someone, it's an advisor that has a legal responsibility to act in your best interest. So our fiduciary team, as we work through retirement plans and recommendations, we are legally liable for the recommendations that we give to a prospect or a client. And so that, I think that's something that's extremely important as you're looking to add someone to your retirement team, someone that's a fiduciary and has your best interest in mind. Okay. Let's see this next one. You talked about increasing taxes in the future. When do you think they'll increase and how much? Well, great question. I wish I had a crystal ball. That would be an amazing asset to be able to nail that on the head. However, I will tell you this. Our current tax rates expire or sunset on December 31st, 2025. And so we have a few more years before they expire. Now, in the past, it's up to Congress to replace those with something different, or if they expire, they just go back to what they were back before 2018, and which are higher rates than now. So if Congress does nothing, they expire and they increase. However, most likely, Congress will replace the current tax rates with something more appropriately matched to our debt level. So there's been a lot of talk of taxes having to be increased by 25 to 30% to be able to kind of match the level of our debt. So consider that as you're doing some of your retirement planning calculations. If what would happen if your retirement taxation was increased by 25%? What would happen if you got 25% less of your paycheck or your Social Security income check? If you got $1,000 a month and then all of a sudden you start getting $750 a month because of increase in taxes, would that impact you negatively? Yeah, I think it would. So great question. Great question. I don't know how much or when, but that's that kind of the framework we have to work with. Fair enough. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. That's all the questions that we have time to go over today. Again, click on schedule now. You'll be able to be led over directly to a sign up page to jump on our calendar and pick a time slot that works best for you. So we encourage you to jump over and do that. Again, I appreciate all of you being here today, and we will look forward to seeing you in our office or online. Have a great day.